Hey everybody, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Nuns. Today we read Numbers chapter 10, so let's get started.
Okay, so the beginning of the book of Numbers is the beginning of the wilderness experience. But the wilderness experience only begins after the Israelites leave Mount Sinai. So by the time you get to chapter number 10 and you're reading about these trumpets at the beginning, the reason why you're reading about these trumpets is that when Israel blows these trumpets, this is kind of a nationwide communication system because there's no radio, there's no TV, there's no cell phones, there's no mass communication. And so imagine the need for somebody to be able to give signals, and they do that by getting in a tall place, on a mountain in a cliff area and blowing the shofar, which is what they would have called their trumpet. A trumpet back then is like a ram's horn, hollowed out. They're curved and they're blowing into this. It's I've got one. They're very difficult to use, so this is a specialized deal. But when they're hearing one at a time, it means something. When they're hearing two, it means something else. But this is all signaling an alert. Remember, by the time you get to Numbers chapter 10 and the Israelites are leaving Mount Sinai, this is 13 months after the Exodus. Jim brought me a shofar. Okay?
Shofar show good.
Yeah. I preached a sermon one time and I called it, I think it was from one of the minor prophets. And I said it was, the title was Shofar Show Good. Thoughts?
Yes.
Okay, let me tell you what I did. This is fun.
Okay.
So I was talking about even the trumpet of the Lord, and I was even tying it into the trumpet sounds and Jesus returns. And so I put it up to my lips and I was like, well, this obviously doesn't work. So I had a guy up in the balcony holding the trumpet, and he was like, the signal was, and we would practice, I would do this, and he would blow the trumpet up in the air. But he wasn't paying attention, and so I went, and then as soon as I put it down about right here, he blew the trumpet. Hilarious. Okay, so yeah, I tell you what this does though. When you read this, remember, they had been living by seeing the presence of God. Okay, so in the day, the Lord's presence would be over the tabernacle. How? In a pillar of what during the day?
Fire. Cloud.
Cloud. And then at night,
it's a fire.
It's a fire, right. So they've been living by sight. They see it. But now they don't just have to have their eyes open. They gotta have their ears open for the sound. Okay? So all of this is moving in and they're leaving there. They've been out of Egypt for 13 months and they've been for 11 months at Mount Sinai. Now listen. When they moved into Mount Sinai, they were just showing up. They leave there highly organized and highly prepared, leaving in ranks, leaving in families, leaving in tribes. But you got to think, over 11 months, they probably got really comfortable at Mount Sinai. They knew where their tents were. They knew where their friends' tents were. They knew where the streams and the rocks and the bumps in the road, they knew where everything was because they lived there 11 months. It was not the promised land, but you stay anywhere 11 months and it starts to feel almost like home. Now God is uprooting them. He took them out of Egypt, but now he's taking them out of Sinai. And he says, no, even this is not home. There's a promised land ahead. And so he's signaling for them to come out. What I like about this, one of my favorite parts is, look in verse 9. It says, and when you go to war in your land. So by the way, battle for them was not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Okay? So when you go to war in your land against the enemy who oppresses you, then you shall sound the alarm with the trumpets. Now listen, watch what happens. And you will be remembered before the Lord your God, and you will be saved from your enemies. Okay? So the blowing of the trumpet wasn't just a call to move, and it wasn't just a call to battle. It was almost like, it says, when the Lord hears the sound of this trumpet, he's going to come and help you from your enemies. So the trumpet blast almost becomes like a national prayer to God. They blow that war trumpet, and the chief warrior says, I got you. And he comes to help. Now look how they behave. And verse 10 says, and also in the day of your gladness in your appointed feasts. And so a close relationship with God isn't just something that brings strict obedience. Sure, there ought to be obedience, but a close relationship with God is also something that's supposed to produce joy, gladness, happiness, enjoyment of God. And so all of this then feeds inside to this community. They're going to a promised land, but they're supposed to be living in a fellowship with God. And they're to keep their eyes open and watch the cloud and watch the fire. They're to keep their ears open, listen for the signals from what's going on. And they're supposed to keep putting one foot in front of the other, following the presence of God. Then there's this unique moment with Moses' father-in-law. Jax, tell us about that.
Okay, so there's one particular section right here where Moses invites his father-in-law to go with them. And so at first, his father-in-law is like a little bit apprehensive, but eventually they get him to come along with them. And so looking at this like from back then, it probably wasn't a super big deal. It's like, hey, you should come with us and come with us like on this journey. But now, looking at it in like retrospect, we can see this is like a really good picture of what happens when we invite somebody into a relationship with Christ. They join the church of Christ, they join the body, and they start walking with us on this sort of journey of sanctification and walking with Jesus. And that's a lot of what we see in this chapter.
Yeah. In the New Testament, we would call this evangelism. Mm-hmm. I mean, what he's doing? He's inviting his father-in-law, who was a Midianite priest. He was inviting him to come join God's family and enjoy the blessings and the favor and the presence of God. He's saying, hey, I'm married into your family, but why don't you come join my family and join in the family of my father? And the father-in-law is kind of like, I don't know about that. But eventually he indeed does join them and he goes with them. We would call that evangelism in the New Testament. We would say that anytime we find a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, a teammate, and we invite them to come meet our Father and join his family through faith in the Son, the only begotten Son of God, and say, hey, come join this family. Let me show you. We open our Bible and we show them about the blessing of God through the good news. What is the good news? That God loved us so much that he sent his only begotten Son, that whosoever would believe in him would never perish, but have everlasting life. We share that good news and we invite them to believe. And if they do, good grief, they join into the family of God. And listen, they go with us in the presence of God all the way to the promised land. We see evangelism, we see missions, teaching them to do that. Well, that's discipleship. Good grief. This is kind of like an early model of what we're supposed to be doing now. It's an incredible picture. The book of Numbers has a lot of good history, but it's also got some important characteristics and foundations for how it is we're supposed to be living our Christian life. So we are moving through the book of Numbers, and you are doing good so far. But let's keep moving on. Thoughts?
Yeah, let's keep moving on.
Okay. All right. We'll see you later. We'll see you next week.
Bye.